Hello, and welcome to another broadcast, and thank you for joining us today. In this segment, we have a special guest joining us. Some of our listeners may have already met her. Her name is Michelle. She is a practitioner at Karmic Channels as a past life medium, Reiki, and healing touch practitioner. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Ron. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. I got out of the house. Thank God.
Yeah. See how creative we have to be to get her out of the house? Hello.
Works.
Normally she charges for stuff like this.
Yes, I
No,
do.
okay. So, Michelle, in this segment, we want to learn a little bit more about you. So, I'm going to start off right away with the first question that I have. When did you first sense that you had any gifts?
I was about three and a half, and we were on the farm, and I saw this shadow, dark person because it was nighttime walk past the window. And at first I thought it could be my dad or it could be grandpa. I wasn't sure. But then I realized I don't recognize that one. And it wasn't until years later that I looked at a picture and figured out it was great grandpa, but he had long since passed. So that was the first experience.
Interesting. And then how did you progress from there? Did you accept it? Did you realize what was going on? Or
It was kind of a give and take, given my childhood and stuff like that, and the fact that we were kind of ultra Roman Catholic. That didn't help. And it was looked down upon. So I kind of cut it off when I was about 8 years old. And it was like the world kind of opened up a little bit, was a little bit brighter because I didn't have the background noise. But it didn't stay squashed for too long. And it started coming up more and more, I think around a little bit in middle school, but mostly high school level.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to my experience. I squashed mine right around between 7 and 8. And then I had that experience with my brother losing his life at 10, and that just turned the light switch on and couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, with all the work that you contribute to Karmic Channels, what is it that you like best when you're helping someone, when you're helping a client?
As I've gotten stronger over a period of time, I think the best thing is either when I'm taking notes, looking at their past lives. So it gives me an opportunity to look at how it's contributing to their current lifetime and some of the images that their guides give me. And sometimes the guides can be extremely talkative, and other times they're just very enigmatic and stand there and go, okay. It's like pulling teeth at that point. But the information that I get, I think, is extremely useful and sometimes completely surprising, because for the longest time I had to figure out, is that me talking or is that the guides talking? And I'm getting the information that way. And having played it out over a period of time now, I've kind of learned to trust it. And sometimes it's surprising, other times I will second guess myself. Otherwise, I will just plain, go for it and take it to where it goes. And I'd say 99% of the time, it's pretty spot on.
So, you prefer the doing the past life readings versus anything else, mediumship or anything like that, because you get into it more?
Yeah, because it's like watching a movie.
Okay. Well, we're saving that particular topic for another segment. What I want to do is get back to when you were younger and regarding past lives. Did you feel at any point when you were younger that these spirits or energies that were around you, you knew them from before and that you felt comfortable with them?
I would have a lot of deja vu moments. I remember thinking as young as grade school that I was probably a mermaid, because I would constantly have the legs together sitting there like you would on a rock and looking out in the distance. And later on I found out through another psychic, yeah, that's exactly what I did. And another time I remember wanting to be a nun because I was one in a past life. So that was a strong pull. Sometimes finishing people's sentences. That was a big one. Or you get an inkling of, I bet this is going to happen, and suddenly it does. Or someone says the exact same thing you were thinking. So it's definitely odds and ends, a lot of deja vu.
Did any of your childhood experience with these energies around you make you feel safe and secure? And did you feel that they were pushing you along or following you?
Um, I it was kind of a give and take. I think at some points it was interesting. It took me out of my home situation, which was not exactly the best. But I had to be very careful about mentioning anything because of the Catholic upbringing, where my dad was uber Catholic and his brother, my uncle, is the priest. So there were certain expectations, in the family
Yeah.
that you had to kind of keep under wraps. So it was not something you could share
Yeah.
necessarily. So it's tough to keep it by yourself because you don't have anything to compare it to. But at that point, I found myself getting more and more into ghost stories, real ghost stories. It's just kind of that Halloween-y feel. And you knew there was something there and something much deeper, but you just didn't know how to access it or what to make of it completely.
So you mentioned the Northeast. Where did you originate from?
Originally Minnesota, and then about second grade onward until I came back out here for college, I was in Massachusetts.
Okay. How long were you there?
A little over 17 years.
Okay. And how old were you when you first moved to Massachusetts?
I would have been about 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
somewhere
this
there.
is kind of when you started turning that off?
Yeah, it only stayed for a short time because you have so much information going through your head, and then being Gemini, everything runs through your head. So it's different because you also want to fit in.
Yes.
You don't want to be seen as strange. And in that time and place, the kids were a lot meaner, a lot rougher. I didn't have family, so if you're looked at as an outcast, you are the next target for the next bully.
Well, where were you at? Are you the oldest of your siblings, or middle, or youngest? Or
Oldest of 6.
Oldest of 6. Did your mother ever, was she open to discussing this with you, or she was totally closed off? Especially with transitioning from Minnesota to Massachusetts at 7, did you have any conversations with her?
No, she could be a flake, and I think she was part bipolar. But it was her way or the highway. And the only reason we moved out east was Virgil, the kids will die and never see the ocean. Thanks, Mom. So we moved out east, and she wanted to get away from Grandma and stuff. So all that stuff that was going on, and it was when she would get something in her head, then she could go with it. My father just kind of looked down at it. And so it was a real dichotomy, but you couldn't tell her anything because she, as much as she was controlling, she was extremely fearful and didn't know how to deal with it. So some things were said like quietly or in kind of an anecdotal way.
It sounds basically like back in that era that most of your childhood and family dynamics was isolation.
Oh yeah, very much.
Okay, and
Very much.
everything was on the hush hush. When was it that you decided that for once and for all you were going to just open up and start developing this subtly, or did it come on very strong for you?
I always knew my maternal grandmother. That was the one thing we could say out loud, is that she had a ghost in her house. It was the doctor that originally owned the house. And that she would have kind of precognitive episodes and things like that, because that comes from the Scottish side of the family. And so it'd be the anecdotal stories. So it wasn't until, I want to say, 20s, 30s that I starting to branch out. So going from theater major and opening up that way and more into, and I saw a lot more of it opening into after having kids and reading things and taking classes, that made a bigger impact.
So at what age did you get married? You got married back here after you moved back here?
What was I, about 24, 25 when we got married, right out of college.
All right, and where were you at that point with your spirituality and this sense of having a gift? Did you ever bring that up with your spouse?
No, because he's really not open to that. I think I pretty much submerged that into a lot of creativity, and expressing it that way. Either through fashion or sewing or whatever. But I was always drawn to real ghost stories because I wanted to know the background, the history, why they stuck around, what was their thought processes as far as that goes. I mean, it's entertaining, but I always want to know the background of it, and I think that set the pattern for everything else.
I know your sister Janine very well, and she's very open and spiritual. When did she start to evolve? Was it because of you?
No, I think she did that on her own. So she started going more towards other religions, being open to that, and so forth. However, because of who she is, and she has a great fear factor in that, when things go out there a little bit, she gloms onto it and says, "Oh, you can't do that because that'll bring in the evilness." So she kind of goes right back to basic training Catholicism 101, you know, so that kind of thing. So yeah, she's open to it, but then again, there's the non-understanding, and almost like the religion closes it off because anything further than what they teach you is considered forbidden. You know, the roles of the devil suddenly come in, and all of this stuff. You know, so yeah.
So when did you open up to the point where you were actually giving advice? Was that mainly towards your children, or was it beyond that and you were actually working with friends and neighbors? Or
I think when my daughter was out of high school and going into college, and then she started opening up and taking, I think she's got over 150 different Reiki things under her belt. And then we started meeting with other friends, and through those other friends, we opened up that way, and we started seeing a few clients here and there. You know, it was kind of scattered at that point because it was still, you know, late 80s, early 90s. So the things were just opening up. So she went to massage school, and that opened it up. They were very open and very open to all of this stuff.
so it was basically your daughter?
That really led the way, yeah.
Okay, and how old was she when she started taking the classes?
18, 19.
And you waited until then to have the confidence to.
Yeah, I mean, I had taken other classes through other venues, and that started going and pushing forward. And then when she started taking her massage therapy classes and so forth, and meeting other people, that kind of coalesced it a little more. And then we started sharing our experiences between all of us. And it's kind of a gauge because you need to know if you're on track, if you're off of it, whether you're listening to yourself or whether you're listening to spirit. So it was nice to bounce off ideas. Sometimes you worry about egos coming in, and that's always a thing in any business. So, and then it kind of worked out from there. So you kind of, you know, even if you're not doing this actively, you're still learning either through reading or watching or listening to people or lectures and so forth.
We mentioned about you doing past life readings, and that's going to be a totally different segment. However, when you're doing past life reading with a client and or doing Reiki energy healing on them or healing touch, how do you keep yourself out of it so you're not absorbing their energy and or reliving their past life with them and absorbing, you know, all sorts of different energies how do you keep yourself protected and cleansed?
Well, you definitely have to ground yourself to start with, and then you ask your guides and the angels to come in. And although sometimes it's funny when the deeper you go into some of the past lives and energies, you wind up, you know, taking it on yourself. So you can feel some phantom aches and pains and so forth. But I found out as I opened up with Reiki and Healing Touch, I was getting more images, and taking a few psychic classes, I liked the idea of going into past lives. That just seemed easy for me. And then I could replay it, re-question it, and then there was a matter of, after a certain point, building the self-confidence to know that it was coming from spirit and not myself.
So when you were growing up, I'm going back to when you were younger, did you ever feel disjointed from your family, disconnected from your family?
Absolutely.
How did that work out for you?
You almost wanted to be the black sheep. And being the oldest, you kind of rebelled in different ways, you know, or just were angry all the time. And even around my friends, I didn't always have the same interests that they do. So it's like standing back and watching life unfold in front of you instead of participating all the time. Even though you did, but there were just some days you just stood back going, why am I even here? And as I've learned over the years, because I'm also empathic, I've taken on a lot of stuff that I didn't realize I did over the years. So whether it was an angry situation in the classroom or whatever was going on at the home or whatever, you absorb that and you just thought, well, that's just your reaction to what's going on. But then I thought back again, okay, I'm one of those people that if I see a sad Disney movie, I'm going to sit there and cry. Or if I see something sad on a card or whatever, I tear up. But you always hid that,
Yeah.
so.
So when you're working with a client, are you working with your spirit guide and theirs, or are you open to mostly their vibration and their frequency? And how far into the spiritual realm do you have to go to actually form the picture for the client?
I have to think on that. I think they're there with me, but then there's almost times I feel like I'm tapping in more to their energy and more their guides than mine. But then I'm also listening to what they're saying at the same time. So it's like an interactive movie, for lack of a better word. And then some days in your head, you can see the guide in front of you. So you're literally having a conversation while working on them. So it's kind of a split screen kind of thing.
Yeah, interesting. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a special segment just on past life readings and some other topics that both you and I may have an open discussion about. Thank you for joining us today, Michelle. We appreciate your work that you do for Carmack Channels, and we look forward to more segments with you. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thanks.